Hello, 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 and welcome to the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I'm Marshall Kirkpatrick, and I have been waiting until this moment to have this afternoon's first sip of coffee. Delicious. Well worth the wait. Thank you so much for joining us today here at the Sprinklr Coffee Club. We're really excited to have you. Whether you're watching live or recorded, you can pour yourself a cup of coffee as well and get ready for an exciting, fast-paced, action-packed, inspiring conversation here with one of my favorite people on the internet, Maureen Blandford.
Delighted to be here. Thanks, Marshall.
Yeah, Maureen, thanks so much for joining us. So Maureen is a trailblazing B2B marketer. She has built networks and connections on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. She's got a great network in Europe, and we're fortunate enough right now for her to be in the United States. Today, she is the VP of Marketing for Nonprofit Solutions at Community Brands, which is a pretty darn big organization that you may or may not have heard of. Perhaps she'll tell us a little bit about that. And she also works as an advisor to a really cool startup from Europe called Code for Thought, which is dedicated to making sure that the algorithms that are increasingly making up a huge part of the world we live in are transparent and explainable and just. It's a really cool startup that I got to learn about from Maureen. So Maureen has lots of really cool experience to share with us today, and we're so glad you're with us today.
Thanks so much. It's always a delight to talk to you.
Thank you. Likewise. If you would like a chance to speak with Maureen today, to ask a question, to contribute to our conversation, if you're watching live, jump into that comments section over on YouTube Live on the right-hand side and put in your thoughts, your questions, and we will incorporate them here into the conversation. And of course, we hope that you will like and subscribe to the Sprinklr YouTube channel for all the Coffee Club fun and other related pieces of information. There is lots of information on the web, in the world today, and Maureen has a very specific thesis about it. I want to start at the top, Maureen, and maybe you can set the stage for us a little bit. It's a noisy time to be a marketer these days, isn't it?
Indeed, it is a noisy time. The proliferation of tech and the way that MarTech and sales tech in particular sells, the proliferation of content folks and their opinions means that there's a lot of noise in the marketplace about what marketers should be doing. And so, yes, I don't take offense at it, but I worry for marketers that they're hearing too much from pontificators who haven't been in these roles, and not enough from folks who are doing the real work every day.
So one of the nuances that you have shared with me is that advice in the abstract is less applicable than advice that is more customized to where a person and an individual marketer is. But we all have our worries either at the forefront or the back of our minds, and we all want to talk, but we're in different circumstances. What do you mean by that?
So let's talk about marketing leaders. And I'm specifically B2B. As you know, I don't have any consumer background. So my whole career has been in B2B, in particular complex sale B2B. So as a marketing leader, when you join an organization or when you're promoted into another, if you're in a Fortune 500, but in particular, when you join an organization, you inherit a specific set of circumstances, right? So you may inherit a healthy database or an unhealthy database or no database, and you have to be building from the ground up. You may be inheriting a young team or maybe a more senior team, and there are pros and cons to that, right? Like junior people, you have to develop more, but maybe they're more switched on to what's going on in the world today. Senior people, you may not have to develop as much, but they may need help modernizing in other ways. You may have a super supportive CEO, or you may have a CEO who is not great. But regardless, you have this wide variety of circumstances that you inherit, and there is no one path. So we can't just pontificate from the market and say, marketers or marketing leaders, you must do X, Y, Z, because it is not applicable to every set of circumstances depending on what you've inherited. Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
It sure does. It sure does. And you have said specifically, for example, that many big conferences with stars on stage miss the mark in terms of their content.
It's true. And to not pick on anyone in particular, we'll pick on like an Ariana Huffington. It may be fun to hear her speak, but she doesn't bring a whole lot of value to any of us who are trying to take stuff away from the conference and do our jobs better. If we're hearing from, in particular, the folks who are full-time consultants, we can get inspiration from those folks, but let me give you an example of what we can't get from them. So unless you're in the day-to-day, whether you're a copywriter or a head of content or director of ops or a CMO, you have limited resources and you are struggling with usually unhealthy data. Nobody has great data behind the scenes, and none of us can admit that publicly because we can't share those company secrets. So every day is a constant juggling and prioritizing about what you have in front of you, what you can do in the short run, and what you can do in the long run. And if you are just out pontificating about what we should be doing with content, for instance, that's often not attached to reality. So there are a lot of really brilliant content thought leaders. And if all of us had a perfect situation with a healthy budget and a supportive boss and collaborative sales leaders and a team that is properly developed already with no issues, then 100% we could follow the advice of these pontificators. But that's not our situation. So we can find inspiration there, but they're not our true north at all.
Oh, interesting. There's almost a survivorship bias, you might say.
That's an excellent take. Yes, absolutely.
So some pontificators, the aforementioned in particular, would recommend that we nap more, as perhaps get some more sleep as a response to that. Which here at the Sprinklr Coffee Club, we propose just the opposite.
Right. And even to use some things generically, Marshall, that we might hear about, that over the years, the pontificators are also guilty of telling us this is king, and then this very thing 8 months later is dead. Or we need to be blogging, 5 times a week, and then for a while it was 5 times a day, 5 times a week, and now we're being told we're doing too much content. So we have to deal with that. Because they need to continue to kind of sell their own wares, and also things just change in the market. The algorithms change, the tech changes. One of the things that marketers struggle with, and marketing leaders in particular, and I was actually just with one of my favorite tech CMOs last night. He happened to be in town and we were kind of, exchanging. We were actually talking as well about what his model is for what an MQL costs, but he was sharing with me his tech stack. But things that we struggle with are, for me, our friend Pema Chodron would say life is wretched and glorious. I would say tech is wretched and glorious. And I'll pick on Google because Google is largely glorious. But, for instance, Gmail. So one of the cool things about Gmail is it is almost scary how well Gmail can guess the end of our sentences, right? So we've all probably experienced yes, that is exactly what I was going to say. And on the other hand, Gmail never knows that I never intend to capitalize the first 2 letters of any word. So I'm typing my thing and then it's those 2, so it doesn't autocorrect and then I have to go back. And for me, that's a great analogy of what all marketers are dealing with our tech stacks. And that is we get some really, really great stuff out of our tech and we get some miserable stuff out of our tech whether the tech is just flawed on its own or it's not integrating with other stuff. And that causes downstream productivity debt because we're chasing down the gaps in attribution or whatever, and that eats up time. So one of the other things that the market will sort of chide marketing organizations or marketing leaders for is they'll often say, like, marketing leaders, you're not dedicating time to train your people on the tech that you're purchasing. And I call BS on that, because the thing that I can't project as a marketing leader are all the ways the tech isn't going to work. And how do I train folks on those issues, those downstream issues? I'm often fixing the downstream tech issues from gaps. So I could go on all day about this, but again, these are the things that the pontificators cannot know because they're not in these roles.
Well, Maureen, it is amazing how someone with as strong a critique as you've got around so many of these thought leaders and influencers is also so good at influencer relations, as I know you are. But perhaps we can come back to that a little bit later. I'm curious if the big thought leaders can often leave you unsatisfied, and if conferences with outliers feel like they're not always super applicable, what channel is better for us to learn through?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Marshall. So I am a really big fan of a personal advisory board. So while I think we can get inspiration from the market, and while I think we can get inspiration from the MarTech companies that are doing some cool work, really where we all need to be connecting more is with each other. I have a personal advisory board that I'm in touch with pretty regularly, and I don't mean that we all gather at one time, but I am checking the work that we're doing constantly against my peers, and I'm also looking for where they're seeing successes. I will have folks come and speak to my team. So many of you may know Jason Miller at LinkedIn, and he's now with Bing. And yeah, so this is a column I wrote about the personal advisory board. It's on Medium, and I think we're gonna put up the link here. But I saw Jason speak at a conference, and he had some really great points about content. So I had him come talk to my team. My iPhone knows that I text Jane Maureen, who's in Dublin, Ireland. She and I worked together when I worked there. She and I are talking several times a week. Eric Whitlake, who is with Topo, which is now going to be Gartner. And the questions that I'll ask are things like, how are challenges like, what's your SDR team doing with your MQLs, and how does it get passed on to sales? Or there are some gaps here in attributions that I'm seeing between this piece of tech and this piece of tech. Or how are you managing folks? So for instance, I was with a fabulous colleague last night who I'm not going to name because I might share a couple of things that he shared with me. But this is a guy who's a tech CMO right now. It has been a tech CMO at several places, had a stint as a director of marketing at Google. And one of the shocking things that I heard from him was that they're actually building some of their own MarTech applications because a lot of the tech that's in the market today is suboptimal. And so because most of us can't share that publicly, so many marketers, I was doing a keynote in London in March, and so many marketers came up after my session and were like, oh my God, we thought we were the only one. And I had that experience with my buddy last night. It was like, you're doing what? So since the market shames us a lot, quite frankly, I mean, the way that MarTech sells to marketers is often shaming. Like, marketers, if you just got data, like you're not doing data right, if you just got content, and we begin to take that on. And so as a marketing leader, even though I'm confident and I'm connected, there are still plenty of times where I'm like, why is this not working? Because we're sold these really big promises. If we just do content in this way, and if we just have a tech stack that looks like this, magic stuff happens. And in reality, the magic stuff isn't happening. And until marketers talk with each other more regularly, we're not going to get the straight scoop. So I live for my connections because they help me advance the work that my company is doing by sharing both their best practices and also the stuff that's not working.
Wonderful. This brings to mind the idea of an opportunity-based narrative instead of a fear or fear of missing out or a scarcity type narrative. John Hagel over at Deloitte, who's one of my favorite writers, says that there's a paradox of connectivity that we suffer today, where we're more connected on some level than ever before, and yet we feel often afraid to be vulnerable with one another, often because of the accelerating pace of work and the increasing performance demands that we all face at work. And so his suggestion is that we build opportunity-based narratives to help people step forward confidently and courageously into vulnerable conversations and change.
Yes, and you know what? I've met so many fabulous people through you, and you've pointed me to him, and I'm following him now. So two things off the back of that, if I can remember both of them. So people don't often feel comfortable doing the work out loud thing, and that's fine. But it's important to do that kind of behind the scenes. And then often our companies would naturally not want us speaking about this. But I had an experience last week, and I think it was ahead of the whole, are we in the middle of Work Out Loud week this week? Is that going on right now? Okay. So, and you and I are both fans of that and the community managers. But I had a thing recently that I felt like I could share publicly, and it was just so phenomenal to me. So my company right now has grown through mergers and acquisitions, and that can be a little bit messy. So we have not really gotten our arms around, besides a decent V1, around customer experience. And you'll know all the talk in the market about who should be owning CX and whatever. But I've just created a new role on my team to handle customer and business insights. And one of the things I asked this guy to do as he was getting started was to find to make sure he understood all the places in our company currently where we have siloed customer insights. So we're doing NPS over here, we're doing product is doing customer interviews over here, et cetera. And we discovered to start 20 or 22 places in our company that we have siloed customer insights that aren't joined up. And that was really compelling to me, but also like, we have 20 places where they're not joined up. And so I tweeted this, and I tagged 3 CX folks, Augie Ray, a woman named Jeannie Walters, I can't remember who else. Oh, Nicole France, who's now with Constellation. And what happened, Marshall, was the most beautiful thing. So these CX experts weighed in, and a couple of them said, like, only 20? Like, you're doing pretty well if it's only 20. And so by being able to process some of that stuff out loud, I was able to expedite some learning for me and for our team here on CX. I mean, it's gorgeous. You see this happen all the time.
That sounds like the foundation of a blog post, in fact, Maureen.
Thanks, man. And we can't always do that. But there are communities where you can do this in, and if you don't have a community, like I happen to be in London next week to visit my kids, and I've got meetings set up with 7 or 8 friends who all, of course, happen to be marketing leaders, and I have 3 or 4 questions that I'm going to be asking all of them, and they're just one-to-one. Like we're gathering for fun, but we'll also talk some work stuff, and that will help me with the insights for my team and add to my strategy. So my peers who are out doing the work every day is where I draw the most inspiration from and support. They're just phenomenal.
Oh, that's fantastic. If you are watching live and have a thought or a question that you want to share with Maureen, she's here right now. This is your chance. So go ahead and drop a question into YouTube. But as you might be able to tell from the way this conversation is going, this is not your only chance to connect with Maureen. Maureen, you do an incredible job of connecting with industry leaders and innovators and fascinating people out on the social web. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have been so successful in doing that?
Yes. So some of it has been serendipity. But what I've detained, so I was kind of into it for a couple of years before I understood my own methodology for doing it. There's probably three basic tenets. The first one is you have to be prepared to toil in obscurity for quite some time. It could be 6 months. So 7, 8 years ago, as I was encouraging other people to be on Twitter, that was the thing. I was like, just be willing to toil in obscurity, be out there and engage, whether people engage back or not, whether they follow back or not, it doesn't matter. So that's one. The other one is listening. So this is kind of your wheelhouse, but by listening to conversations and listening to other humans, you can very easily see what they value, very easily. And I would carve this into two sections. There are a lot of people who started out, particularly on Twitter, who were just sort of blasters. They're posting all the time. They're trying to get clicks and whatever. And these are people I am not interested in. The people that I am interested in are the folks who are actually having real conversations online, and they're out there. So I don't find Twitter to be a hellscape. I find Twitter to be a beautiful garden of fabulous because of the people that I interact with and follow. So those things, toil in obscurity, listen. And then the third thing is engage with value. So, when you introduced me to Diane Hinchcliffe, or just that he was out there, John Hagel, who knows what I'll do with John Hagel, but following people, seeing what they're interested in, and then engaging with them in that. So I wouldn't say to a Diane Hinchcliffe, like, hey, Diane, will you talk to me? I'll say something like, hey, Diane, I know you're really interested in this. Here's this cool thing going on over here that you might really like. And then I do what I call drop the mic, walk off stage. Don't expect anything. Just seed conversations and seed relationships. And then for funsies, I will share that, Marshall, I think you and I met during the Google Plus days. So I was laughing as we were getting set up here because you have your whole radio set up. And I think I had seen a video that you had done at Little Bird, and I just loved how you sounded. And I told you that. And I didn't care if that was a weird thing to do. It was just like, hey, man, you did that really well. And it was really good. And it was great, And that's how you and I started interacting.
Oh, so, yeah, it sure was. And then we got to meet in person.
We did.
At an event.
We did.
And there's nothing like that online, offline combination to help. And we've been on stage together, speaking together now.
Yep.
And here we are, being in the coffee club together.
And it's funny because, and you and I probably have talked about this, but especially for people who might be new to Twitter, let's say, or new to social. And Twitter is my preferred professional platform. It might feel at first like you will never get the hang of this. And that you don't know how to break in, but truly, if you just listen and join the conversation and just kind of evidence your savvy rather than trying to show off your savvy, it's amazing how people engage, and they want to engage because people like Marshall or Diane or whomever. There's so many good people. Nicole France, Rachel Hoppy. If you're just having a great conversation. They get a feel for you in that way, and you can trade resources. I mean, it's just, Twitter has advanced my own personal development, professional development, and my career. It's been amazing just from having conversations and listening to people. I know you're a fan of Twitter. Yes.
Yeah, I love it. I can't imagine where my life would be and my career would be without Twitter.
100%.
So, Maureen, I realize I should have asked you a little bit more. Do you have any thoughts about how you're going to approach this 20 siloed CX insights? What came out of that conversation you had on Twitter?
Well, it's interesting. So, of course, the folks that I got feedback from, the professionals, pointed me to resources. So Augie Ray has just been behind Gartner's new CX model, which I have on my screen behind our screen. I've got it printed out. Nicole France, Constellation Research, has got some really great stuff. So they have actually curated for me, Marshall, rather than me going out and doing a bunch of research, which I could. These people that I trust, or that I've met through people that I trust and now trust, are serving me up the latest and the greatest. And I can run with it from there. I've also, of course, heard from people who are like me and in my shoes, who give some emotional support. It is nice to hear that other people are in your shoes, and it's nice to hear what they've done or what they're struggling with. I mean, that's just so valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, it's almost like the difference between one single vantage point and a second, creating depth to your understanding of a common problem.
Absolutely. And then we're starting, we've got a CX roadmap, and we'll be looking for help there, but that's what we're doing with it. And the more I'm hearing from people, the more I'm hearing that the 20, the multiple siloed customer insight things, not unusual. If you just listen to what the pontificators are saying about CX and where we should be, you would wonder, what are the magical companies that they're working with that are doing this brilliant CX work? Because they're probably 2 to 3% of companies that are really far ahead. And then there's a big bulk of us in the middle, right? Who are just trying to figure it out.
Yep, that's the distribution spread across the maturity model for an organization. So it's real interesting to hear you say, Maureen, that Augie at Gartner and Nicole at Constellation are thought leaders that you've connected with to get insights on solving this business problem, and that they have brought you resources from their analyst firms that you've got printed up and ready to use. So when people say that folks out there in large organizations really are going to analysts like that to solve their business problems, that sounds like you got a great story right there of exactly that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And some cool things. I haven't studied this, but some interesting points about Nicole, or one interesting about Nicole France at Constellation, Augie Ray at Gartner, is they happen to be two analysts who have been leaders for companies as well. So they've done analyst roles, they've been in industry, they've done analyst roles, they've been in industry. And that's really nice to see with thought leaders, because they've actually had to do the work as well.
Mm-hmm. So many people who don't have a history of engaging with analysts, I think, presume that it's the evaluative research reports, the Gartner Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves, that are the be-all, end-all of what those analyst firms have to offer.
Yeah, you're right about that. And this is another thing we should be sharing. So when you and I last talked, the work you're doing with analysts, I've been telling people about, because you're really getting a robust relationship there. And I don't think most folks that are paying for analyst relations are doing it the way you're doing it. And I think your model is great.
Oh, thanks. Well, perhaps you can start a podcast and bring me on it, and we can talk about it sometime.
Absolutely.
Well, that's wonderful. I appreciate it. We do get to talk every once in a while, not often enough, but to get to talk here in public with others is a lot of fun. I really appreciate your taking the time to come and share your experience and thoughts, to be vulnerable about being vulnerable, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's been great. And I know that there are folks out there that are going to really appreciate those insights and take them back into their work and lives. And hearing the way you articulate that makes me feel smarter as well. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Marshall.
Well, folks, time flies when you're feeling inspired and drinking coffee. So thanks for being here with us at the Sprinklr Coffee Club. Please go and connect with Maureen over on Twitter at MaureenB2B, and come back and join us next time we do the Sprinklr Coffee Club. We appreciate your engagement. Have a great day.